What I think I might do is go back to my Photoshop file and I'll grab some of these objects and maybe we can have our players interact with them. Can't go too far on this because one of the things that's going to gate us from having treasure chests giving us items and talking to NPCs and stuff is I've got to plan out how I'm going to do text boxes and stuff and how I want them to look. What I might do is I might put the chest, pots and barrels in and have a on-off kind of state for both of them so you can see which ones you've gone and like stuck your hand into, for instance. I can probably do the switches as well, switches and gates. But yeah, one of the next things I'll have to do is start thinking about how I'm going to lay out the UI. Text is actually a little bit more tedious than it leads on to be, mainly trying to get scrolling text. So I really want to kind of plan ahead before I start implementing that, because you got to think about how you're going to load your text in and then keeping it confined to the text box and highlighting certain pieces of text and putting, I might want little icons for items and stuff in front of their name in the text box. And I haven't thought about how any of that's going to look. We're going to keep it simple today. We're just going to make a little bit of progress. I'll let you know how I go. How about that, huh? Does that sound good? Sounds good to me, so I don't know why it wouldn't sound good. Alright, see ya. Alright, I'm back. I've done a little bit of work. I'll show you what I've done. So here we are again. You'll notice instantly in debug mode my boxes around my party members are now green, and this is because they are a different kind of box, one where other party members can freely walk through each other. So we'll no longer get stuck and it should be much easier for us to navigate. It kind of looks a little bit wonky, but it follows the rules. It's all good. It's already caused me a little bit of trouble having this conga line going, but we'll get to that in a little second. You'll see that I've put some of the objects that I originally had in the map plan into here. Let's have a go at interacting with them. So I can go up to the chest, interact key, boom, opens. Keep hitting the key, doesn't open anymore. It's also solid. You can see the red collision boxes around all the interactable stuff, which is great. Pots and barrels work the same. There's no like text box or items obviously yet. The only indication that I'm actually interacting with them besides you actually hearing me press the key is that their sprite changes. So I've done the same with the pot and the barrel. So the pot it loses its little cog that was in it, and the barrel, the top just comes off like that. Pretty simple stuff, but I think it'd be pretty cool to have that for everything interactable, because then you can tell what pots and barrels and stuff you have checked. I also thought later on it might be a cool idea to have like some classes with the ability to smash the pots or the barrels instead, which for some reason make them wield better rewards, or you can get like some of the ceramics from the pot or the wood from the barrel and use that for something. The silver lining the chest maybe, I don't know. Anything can happen, let's be real guys. Bloody RPG right here. So those are the simple ones. They all work the same. Once they're open they can't be closed again. Ideally they'll have treasure or something in them, all the goods. A little bit more sophisticated here is my little switch and gate. You can see I go up to it, boom, switch goes down, gate goes down, can walk through it now. Hit the switch again, gate comes back up. So that's a little variation of the others. This one has the ability to be opened and closed again. Technically the others do as well. They're all part of the same inheritance tree that I'll get to in a minute when we see the code. But yeah, these switches have the ability to be on and off. Obviously when the gate's up I can't interact with it, and it's got its collision box right there. Now one little tricky thing was the fact that, say I've got my conga line, I could be positioned like that, ready to hit the switch, and you can see my little green dude. He's in a bit of trouble, isn't he? But thanks to some sneaky coding right here, he's actually not going to be crushed today. Cool. So I'll briefly go over how I achieved that. All of those objects are in here, and they're all children of our parent chest. Sometimes with most object names I've got OBJ at the start for objects, but sometimes I'll put PAR, which denotes parent, because it's the parent object. If I go into its information you can see it's got a bunch of children here. If you've done any programming you'll know that that means that these inherit the properties of this parent. It saves a lot of copy and pasting basically. Anyway, I've called this class of items chest, even though you know, a switch and a gate aren't traditionally what you think of when you call chest. A better descriptor would be interactable maybe, because they're the things that our player controller, if we go back to where our movement code was, you can see our keys here. I've added the E, and keyboard E at the moment is what interacts. So if that's checked, then we know the player wants to interact. After all the movement stuff, if there wasn't actually a move, then it checks to allow us to see if we want to instead interact with whatever we're facing. This, you can see this bulk of code much smaller. We just take the direction and then we do what's essentially a collision check, except this time it's called check for chest at. You know, it looks very similar to our collision at, putting the coordinates in, and then we're doing a collision point test to check if our parent chest is there. And because it is the parent of all of these things, that means that this collision point will actually be satisfied if it finds any of our chest children as well. That actually causes a bit of a problem for our gate initially, because we don't actually want the player to walk up and be able to press E onto it. But that's where we've got, after we've seen if we've got a valid instance, we do a quick check to see if it's what we call active, which means it can be interacted with at all. And gate is the only one currently that cannot. But for other reasons, you know, during story segments where there are chests I don't want you to interact with for whatever reason, I can switch that as well. But if we do successfully get a chest that's active, then we have a valid target, and then we put that into chest open, which using the chest ID, which is what this argument 0 denotes, we basically check if it hasn't been opened yet, then we go ahead and open it. Otherwise, if it's closed, we can close it if it's enabled to be closed with can close. And currently the only thing that can be closed is, well, the gate and the switch, because we can repeatedly use those. Cool. I think for now that is sufficient detail. I'm going to take a break, but one last thing I might attempt to do, make like an NPC out of just using one of the player classes I've already got, and I'll have it walking around on its own. Still, I won't be doing any tech stuff today, but I can make it that if the player interacts with him, he can face the player as well, maybe pause his movement, you know. So I'm just going to interject here. I actually had the same problem with all these other objects that I was interacting with. What I'm trying to do now is have the player talk to my NPC, so I'll just run it to show the failure I'm referring to. So you can see I've got an NPC here and he's walking, that's all good. He has collision, it's fine. He won't walk into me or the walls, which is great. But I'm trying to interact with him and he's meant to be turning towards me, and he's not doing that. And the problem is I'm using essentially the same code as I'm using for interacting with these objects, so you know that works. So why doesn't this work? Well, one thing that's important to note when using GameMaker's collision functions for the is to actually be conscious of what the collision mask is. When you add a sprite, you can see its sprite information under modify mask, its collision mask information, sorry. And by default it'll actually be automatic, which as you can see, it's very small, but you can see there's a grayish rectangle around, and that is what GameMaker is going to use for collision. Now that isn't actually the full 16 by 16 size of the file here. What it does is it uses these parameters that's automatically put in to define the corners of the square. So 2 from the left, 1 from the top, that's the top left corner of the collision rectangle. Since we're being very strict with grid and we're keeping all our orientations at 0, 0, which is the top left corner, by default that top left corner isn't actually part of the collision mask. So what I'm going to do is I want all of these to be full image, which just does the whole file. To be a master, Pokemon master. Oh, well that's different. He's not actually facing me, but he's receiving the notification that, oh, there you go, he faces me and then quickly makes a move, or he doesn't so quickly. Yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to achieve. You can see he's reacting to me, he's conscious of where I'm talking to him from. Okay, well I think I've done enough for today.